So, my title today was automate everything, but do it properly, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute. Originally, this slot was earmarked for a talk quite narrowly focused on Microsoft 365, and we had a chat last week. So thank you to those who were here last week and fed in. You'd like something a bit broader and a bit less specifically focused on technology or a technology. Hopefully this will hit the spot, and we'll tell you some useful things that you can do to get started. So, okay, I'm going to start, and apologies to anyone that hates stats, but I'm going to start with some stats because I think it's important to understand some context here. So let me just do this. So this is a piece of analysis that was done by McKinsey. It was done originally on the US labour market, and that's what these stats relate to, but they have actually subsequently repeated it for the UK market. And although they haven't yet released the full data set, the headline is basically it's the same. But I thought this is worth thinking about. So this is kind of why should you care about automation? So what they looked at was they said across 750 different occupations, what could be automated? What amount of work could be automated based on currently demonstrated technology? So not all of that technology is commercially available, but all of it at least exists and has been demonstrated to work together. There's a further kind of range that they've also done where they've gone a bit further and said, what about the technologies which we know are coming but haven't really been practically demonstrated yet? And you know, the message is kind of similar, but more so. And there's a lot of information on this screen, but if I just try and draw out a few things that hopefully are kind of helpful to understand. If you think about the sorts of things that you know we probably all do, there are a number of activities here. So the blob graph is basically a ratio of what can be automated going up versus the average hourly rate. So if, for example, you look at something very specifically down in the bottom right-hand corner, that might be, for example, being a surgeon or something like that, where there is some capability for technology to augment that, the hourly rate of the specialist individual is very high. So, you know, they're not really going to get put out of a job by automation, and that's, the drawing's not there, it is drawing now. That's sort of these things down here. And conversely, a lot of quite manual jobs, so this darker green, particularly in production up here, where potentially all of it, you know, and you can think about factory workers on production lines that, you know, within the last sort of 30 or 40 years in some industries, such as vehicle manufacture, have been almost completely replaced with automation and robotics. But actually, it's a little bit easier to understand it if you look at the bar graph on the left. And if you think about the sorts of things that we do as individuals, there are activities that we do around coaching and training people, some of us, and that's the sort of purplish colour you see here. And you can kind of see, I don't know really what the mathematical average of that is, but let's say that's in the sort of 20 to 25% of that work is something that could be automated. If you then start thinking about, okay, what about those of us that are doing any sales activity, which, you know, we're all doing some amount of, but sales is really kind of in here, with the peak definitely around this 45 to 50%. So kind of half of sales activity could be automated. And then there's the sort of administrative stuff that we all do as business owners. And that's this kind of lime green color, which is sort of here. There's a bit of another blob down the bottom, but it's really up here. And actually, if you average that, it's probably somewhere near 60 to 70%. So somewhere up here. So you start thinking about what that means for all of our work. That means there's actually quite a lot of potential to use technology to take away some of the tasks that we're spending our time doing. And in so doing, allow us to actually have more of our working week either to do the things that we love doing, or potentially just to have, you know, a longer weekend. And the average that McKinsey arrived at through this study was 30% of all work could be automated today with these technologies. And they estimate a further 20% could be automated with technologies which are in development and will be commercially available by, I think it's 2035 was the date they picked. So that's quite a lot, but if you start thinking about that 30%, you think, all right, maybe that's aggressive for what we all do. Perhaps we can only do half or 2/3 of that. That's still amounting to nearly a day a week. So, you know, potentially what that could mean is you could either see, you know, far more clients in a week, or you could possibly have a 3-day weekend, you know, depending on how you know, where your priorities sit. And the reality is you can choose not to do this stuff, but you need to recognize that obviously there are other people out there that are doing this. And one of the things that you have all heard me say, and I know, and it's also something that is part of the kind of vegan business tribe mantra as well, is it's about helping vegan businesses to really kind of outcompete some of the non-vegan alternatives so that we can actually offer our products and services to a broad range of customers at a price they're prepared to pay. And that means we need to keep up with some of this stuff, and we can use some of this as a bit of a sort of secret weapon to compete with some of the larger incumbents. And it is something which is easier to adopt when you're a smaller, more agile company than when you become one of the very large ones. So with that said, that's kind of the why. But then the other thing I always like to think about with this is this Bill Gates quote about automation, because really the point he's driving at here is actually before you automate anything, you really need to make sure your processes are efficient, because otherwise all you're going to do is do a bad process really quickly and allow you to generate a lot more potential problems than actually run more efficiently. And that's why when I talk to people about automation, I always start with, well, I have 3 pillars, and I always start with people. Because you've got to have the right attitude and the right knowledge and the right skills within a business, whether that's a one-person business or a larger business. And if that's not there, you need to start by building that. But then the second thing I always go to is process, because you've got to get the processes right. And the technology is then the last bit, which is where you say, okay, so I've figured out all my processes and I know what I'm trying to achieve. Now I'm going to figure out what tools are the best ones to achieve it with. But actually, as small business owners, that's often the opposite way around from the way we think of problems, because a lot of the time we're advertised software, buy this, get that, or someone will say, oh, I've used this tool, it's really great. And we allow ourselves to become technology-led, and we go off and we go and choose the tool, and then we can't quite work out how to properly implement that in our business because it's not a great fit, or because we didn't have the knowledge that we needed, or because our processes don't work quite right. And we've kind of put the cart before the horse, but it happens because the software companies obviously are very good at selling us their products, and you know, they've moved over the years away from selling a small number of units of high-priced software to big blue chips into a world where really they just want to ship as many as they can to people like us at relatively low price, so you know, quite a low hurdle to getting it, but then you tend to just leave the subscription running. And you know, with 1 million people spending £20 a month or something, you've got a lot of money coming in, right? So that's obviously why it happens. So, oh, sorry, I'll turn off the pointer. Right, so thinking about process then to avoid that happening, I try to distill businesses down to a kind of high-level process flow, and a few of you will have seen this before, I'm sure, but let me just talk through how I do this. So every business has a core delivery that it does, right? So everyone on here will have, you know, either be able to see something that they do, which may not be the whole of their business, but at least an activity that they deliver on this list, or I've missed some, you know, and of course I've missed some because there are so many different things. But the core of what you do, whether that's being a coach, or whether that's doing someone's accounts, or whether that's setting up a concert, whatever it might be, that's your thing, that's what you do. So that is your core activity. And then if you start thinking about how that works, you will have, in order to get people to do that, you will have some sort of discovery process. It might be a booking call, it might be a diagnostic call, it might be an audit, you might be doing a quote or an estimate, but there's some process that your customers go through before they get to delivery, where you understand what the problem is, they understand what you do, and you have some sort of dialogue, and you agree what needs to be solved. And then after that, because we all like to get paid, you probably do some invoicing. That's always quite nice. And so that's sort of the process flow. But actually, then when you think about it, there's a lot more other things that go on. So actually, after invoicing, quite often you might get a repeat client that come back for some more delivery, and then you invoice them again, and they hopefully keep going around that loop for a very long time because they're happy, and that's fantastic. So that's sort of the first bit of the flow to think about. But then actually, if you start thinking about how do people get into that discovery process, you realize that there are various other things that may or may not happen in your business, but if they do, you're probably getting more flow through. So somehow you're capturing leads. You're doing that whether you've got a structured lead capture process or not. You're talking to people, or perhaps you've got, perhaps you're doing active advertising and you've got proper forms to capture that information and that kind of stuff. And a lot of the time, to get people into that lead capture process, you'll have some sort of landing page that you'll be pushing people towards to learn about your business, and then you enter their information, raise an inquiry, and then you'll set up the call, and so it starts. Then at the other end, once you've actually done the invoicing, what you should be doing, although a lot of business owners don't, is you should also be asking for a review, testimonial. Obviously really powerful thing to have, but only if you use it. So you probably want to put that on your landing page. And the first thing you notice when you get to this point and then looking at the overall processes, you've actually got kind of a loop here. The more good quality deliveries you're doing, the more income you're generating, but actually you're generating positive reviews, which are going on your landing page, which are making it easier to capture leads and pushing more volume around the loop. And when we look at process, we actually quite often see these feedback loops in place, and this is a positive feedback loop. The faster you go around, the better it is, but you need to be a little bit careful, because it also means if you're doing a terrible job delivering, you're going to get poor reviews. You actually reduce the volume of your new business. So it's important to understand where these exist. But when you then step back a bit more, you think it's not quite as simple as that. There's a few more things that happen, because actually just invoicing someone's not very good. You probably want to get paid as well. That's always quite nice. So you need some sort of payment process. And then over the other side, you start thinking, well, actually, how do I book people on for delivery and for actually these discovery calls? I've probably got some sort of calendar booking process, and that probably needs to be two-way, because this obviously calendars get complicated. And then with reviews, well, actually, you're probably going to push people, really, you should be starting to push people, if you're not already, onto the bigger review sites, certainly the likes of Google, because writing a review on your website is great, but actually if someone reads that, how do they know that's a genuine review and it's not that you just wrote, Joe Blogg said this about my business? As actually, it's got some social proof, but far more social proof if someone can go to an independent source like Google and see the actual review is there. So that starts to become more important, particularly as you grow. When you're a very small business, there's a good chance some of your clients will know others and they would feel they can check it out. But as you grow, that becomes more difficult. On the payment side, you then sort of have to think about what you're going to do with your accounts and how that's going to work. And you need to tie the invoicing together. So there's a process that starts to build up over there. And then I'm just trying to get these windows out of the way. And then just thinking about actually how you're going to get traffic to your landing page. Well, you probably have some sort of lead magnet. If you haven't, you should get one, something that people can download that gives them a bit of value in exchange for their email address. If anyone needs examples, I've got a few. I'm sure many of you have, but something that starts to drive people into the landing page. And then, this has been very silly, right? And then the other thing to start thinking about is your reviews. You probably want to do something with them. So maybe social media is a great plan, and that will help to drive more lead capture. And perhaps you want to do some mailings. And again, that's starting to drive more people to your landing page or maybe directly to your discovery calls. And you're going to use the leads you've already captured to try to warm them up through a funnel to try to push them further forward. So you can start to see by this point, you're okay, actually this process is getting quite complicated. And then the last bit that you might want to do is some advertising. Obviously, you're going to need to get paid to afford the advertising, but hopefully once you've got that, that's going to drive people either to your lead magnet or your landing page. So what I do when I work with clients is I help them to try and draw this sort of map out for their business. It's often going to look quite a lot like this, but there are different subtleties. If you're a plumber, your business is going to look different than if you're in manufacturing, which is going to look different than if you're, say, a counsellor or a coach. But fundamentally, I help people to sort of start by drawing this plan out, because what you can then start to do is think, well, okay, which of these steps have got to be manual? Which of these steps do I absolutely have to do myself? And when you really start thinking it through, there's an awful lot of this that you don't need to be doing. It does not need to be your time that is a constraint to how much of this you can do. Yes, you are the one that is probably driving delivery, unless you're a manufacturing business. Certainly if you're thinking coaching, consultancy, those sorts of professional services businesses that I know many of you are involved with, that is you. You probably also need to do the discovery calls. That is also you. But every other thing on here where there's a red arrow is a step that does not have to be you, that could be automated. And if you look at that, that's basically the whole process. So that's how much you could potentially automate. And imagine if your business is simply you focusing on those two boxes and everything else is just running itself, how much less work you need to do in a week. So that's why it's important. But don't just take my word for it. This chap, Professor Leslie Wilcox from London School of Economics, has done a study on it, and he has calculated that for every £1 spent on automation, it generates on average between £1.30 and £3 return in the first year. And actually, that rises typically to over £5 in the second and subsequent years. But just in year one, you should at the very least return any cost you put into automation and potentially triple it by saving costs and increasing the amount of income you can generate in your business by freeing up time. So there we go. So that is me. Any questions?
Yeah. So in terms of, so can you hear me?
I can hear you.
So I've got my automations. I'm just wondering what you think of some of them, if there are any improvements, because I'm always keen to know if there's anything better out there. So I use Dubsado. I know some people use Honeybooks, and also if it's which is the best ethically, actually. So Dubsado for automating invoices and all my contracts and all my leads. Some people use Honeybooks. I know Bonsai is free. What one would you recommend for automating? As a
kind of general rule, I try not to say this is like the one silver bullet system, because the one thing I've learned is that everyone's business is slightly different.
Right.
Dubsado is a very good choice, though. It is a solid platform.
What one do you use then?
What do I use? I use a number of different things in my business, right? So
okay.
I actually use Xero for all of my accounting, and my invoicing is done through there. But I have a series of automations, and I use a tool you may have come across called Zapier, which is a piece of middleware. So I use that to trigger a number of activities. I use a combination of HubSpot and MailChimp as my CRM and emailing, and I do that principally because with a bit of cunning you can use the features of free HubSpot and fairly low cost MailChimp package to actually get everything you'd get for a lot more money if you bought fully into either one of them. But I mean, again, and other clients I've worked with who would use, say, ActiveCampaign in that space. Dubsado's good if you're the sort of business where you can put everything in one platform. And I've certainly worked with some people that do that, and there are a number of them, but I think for your sort of business, Dubsado would be a better fit than something like Kartra or Zenler or one of those, which are very geared.
So I use Kartra for funnels for building other people's. So Kartra for building other people's funnels, but not for invoicing. But I've never heard of Xero before, so I love this conversation because I'm learning.
Good. Well, no, I mean, Xero. So to me, Xero with an X is the
Xero with an X. Could you X as an XERO?
Yeah, XERO.
Oh wow! See, I wrote that down. I put a Z, so thank you.
Lisa's got it in the chat. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Xero to me is, certainly for the UK, is the easiest of those accounting packages to integrate.
Right.
And for small business, that's probably the best choice if you're starting from a greenfield site. There are some other good ones. There's, you get a lot of stuff around QuickBooks, which is really great for the US market, but it doesn't really work so well in the UK. Sam, which one do you use? Remind me, because you use the Free Agent. That's the one I was trying to think of the name of, which is, as the name would suggest, is free, right? For a lot of the functionality.
So
it's not actually free. So they do a half price, which is 100 and something for the first year. But what I found with it is it links everything, and it's got, so you can photograph all your receipts and everything. And I found it was one of the cheaper of the account. So I think I still paid £300 a year, but it was still one of the cheaper. And it anything that comes, so it links my bank account. So anything that comes in, it automatically links that up, so I don't have to bookkeep, basically.
Yeah, which is what Xero is as well.
Are these more accounting ones rather than, so, I mean, what I like about it is that it's got my contracts on, it has my DocuSign. Are you using separate document signing applications on top of that? Or does Xero and Free Agent do that as well?
Yeah, no, they are accounting platforms. So you can use them for your invoicing and all your banking reconciliations, quotes as well. But it does depend, how you want to run your business. If you want to put all of your business into one platform, then a tool like, Dubsado is as good an example as any, allows you to do all that in one platform, which is fine. But you need to kind of accept that the trade-off you're making is that you are going to fit your business to how they imagine your business should run. Whereas if you're using a few different tools, you've got that flexibility saying, actually, I want to do this slightly differently than the author of this software decided I should. So it depends on how, how kind of bespoke your business is and how much it might fitting the mold or not. I've got some clients, for example, in construction, who will go to a very specific package that's designed for people in construction and do the whole end-to-end, like the quoting and the job scheduling and the invoicing all under one roof, and it's a great fit for them. But then they decide suddenly that they want to, go into doing decorating or something as a sideline, and they realise that doesn't fit anymore because actually it was never envisaged, and that's really disruptive when you have to kind of come away from it. Whereas when you've got different building blocks, as long as you understand how they fit together, it's easier to just flex your offering. So it does depend. Are you comfortable having 5 or 6 bits of software talking to each other but giving you a lot of flexibility in your business, or are you more comfortable knowing it's all in one place, but you do have to operate how they want you to operate? And you've also got that slight kind of, concentration risk of if that software company sells out and says we're closing, and we've seen a few do that during 2020. So actually we're selling our software to a big one, and that's that. You've got a problem.
I mean, I've never felt restricted by Dubsado. I've never felt like I can't do anything, but it's interesting to maybe look at the other options and get them to talk to each other, maybe join through Zapier. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some key pillars every business will have, which you just don't mess with unless you have to. So one is the accounting platform, because you do not want to change that, except maybe at year end, but even then it's not easy. So get that, stick with it, unless there's a good reason to move. And the other is
anybody using the Wix platform?
Wix platform for beyond the website.
Well, the Wix have extended their back office capability, and I find it absolutely phenomenal. So not only can you build your own website, but you can use it as a whole complete CRM package as well, free.
Yeah, they have added quite a lot to it. It is good. The big downside with Wix is it doesn't talk very nicely to anything else. So if you want to add stuff it can't do, it's quite painful.
Well, I can link Wix into Wix into QuickBooks. It also goes into Stripe for all the payment platform, and it also goes into Tide Banking as well. And it's a click of a switch. I've never had a single problem with it.
Yeah.
The only thing Wix I'm finding with, the only thing I find with Wix is you can't attach Zapier for it to run Facebook ads Zapier into Wix, and I can't find a way around that, and it just doesn't happen, I don't think. So because I couldn't do that, there is. Sorry, Will, what did you say?
No, sorry, I didn't know what Zapier is.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's kind of a plug-in each side, if you like. Takes one thing to another.
It's an orchestration tool. So what it does is sits between bits of software and allows you to make one thing in one piece of software happen in another. So, for example, I've got a link set up so that when I issue an invoice, it also issues out a request to say, hey, would you give me a review? And then if I get a review, it then issues out a request to go and plant a tree. So
I've just literally, oh, sorry. Because I couldn't get it to Wix, I had to buy Active Campaign for my lead magnets to be able to go into that to build the funnel. But it was like £500 a year, and for a little business like mine, and it was so complicated I couldn't figure out how to use it. I've just come off it. So I'm kind of frantically thinking, oh dear, what shall I do now? So I've been looking at HubSpot. But I'm kind of like floating at the moment. And do I actually need one anyway? Because I don't have very many customers or clients, because it's the very nature of coaching. You just don't take on a load of people, otherwise you wear yourself out. So do I actually need one? I'm thinking, but I suppose for lead magnets,
demonstrated my point about, you know, actually figuring out what the process and requirements are before you go for the software, because we all do it. I've done it myself, you know, and I should be the person that should be going like, don't ever do it. I've never done it, but I've definitely done it, where you see software and you go, oh, this isn't quite working. I'll get this other tool because they promised they'll do it. But actually you haven't done the whole kind of process piece first. So then you go, oh, I didn't really need that. I've spent money on something I didn't want, you know. And that's really kind of the heart of the problem.
But I need something like my Facebook ads to Zapier to go ideally into Wix, but it won't do it. So I don't know where to flipping put it.
Do you mean you can't put your pixel on Wix for your Facebook? Is that Facebook pixel on Wix to track it? What is it you can't do on Wix?
I can't attach Zapier to Wix from Facebook ads to Zapier to Wix.
You can only pull out.
And why do you need Zapier? Because can you check it any other way, or do you have to use Zapier?
I can't connect Facebook directly to Wix.
Yeah.
Wix do their own Facebook advertising, but it's not what I want. I need to get my lead magnets out.
And that's kind of the point when you go with a platform. You know, Wix is again another good example. You're in their closed ecosystem. They want to keep you in there. They don't want you using other people's tools, so they make it hard. Whereas when you take the more modular approach, obviously you would have more stuff going backwards and forwards. So I think that's, you know.
And if you use WordPress,
to go to them if you're kind of comfortable that it's going to give you everything you need. But if you think you're going to need to add things later on, you know, you will have that extra pain. You rely on
my website guy keeps telling me to go to WordPress.
Oh, don't.
Yeah, you do need to go to WordPress, because WordPress is far more better for any plugin, any more adaptations and SEO. So Wix looks really easy, but you can't use it.
I had a WordPress before for various different sites and different businesses, and I could never get in. I could never work it, so it doesn't work for me. So that's why I'm with Wix, because, like Will says, it's just so easy and it's pretty much all in there and it's automated. It's fantastic. For the price, I think it's amazing, and it just ticks all my boxes. But the only thing is I can't get my lead magnet out there and fix it onto Wix. That's my only bugbear. But so I was just wondering whether I should go for HubSpot or MailChimp, or as you just said, you can just pick out the 2 freebie bits. I might have a look at that.
Yeah, so I use both. I have them synchronized to each other, and I use HubSpot as my CRM, and then I use MailChimp to run my funnels, because the HubSpot version of that is really expensive. I think it works out. I can do it on the 15 quid a month plan, although I suspect I'll be rebuilding that quite soon, because MailChimp's just been purchased, and I'm sure that means prices will be going up. It's usually what happens. So that's the other problem that you have in this space, though, right? Is that the software itself, the companies are constantly buying each other, selling, you know, taking features off, adding features on, and it's kind of permanently moving. You know, what works one month might not work the next month, especially under the sort of subscription model that obviously we're all part of now. So that's where, again, it's like doubly important to understand the process and requirements before you make the decision, because that way, if something changes, you know why you made the decision. It's a lot easier to then go and say, okay, is there another option that now makes sense to go to, rather than kind of having that sort of visceral reaction when, let's say, they take some feature away that you liked, but maybe you didn't actually need, and going, right, that's it, I'm going to go somewhere else. It just gives you a little bit more structure to have that sort of process, right? So, Sam, your hand is up.
I just thought it was probably worth mentioning as well that it's really important as well to keep track of what you're subscribing to.
Yes.
Because I've had clients previously where they've got multiple subscriptions to things, where they've used other freelancers, etc., and they just don't have a clue what any of these things are doing, and they could be spending upwards of £200-300 a month in things that they're not actually using, or the subscriptions are just going out of bank accounts and accounting software is just automatically accounting for it, and you don't even know where that's going. So it's a good idea, I don't know, Mark, how you do it, just to have some kind of log of, you know, what's where and when, and just because
when
actually
I start working with someone, we do a full audit of, we basically draw that process and go, what software have you got in each box? And there should be pretty much one thing in each box. It may be one thing in, you know, the same thing might be in all of the boxes, but what they shouldn't be is 3 different bits of software in one box, right? And then you always find it. I completely agree. I usually find that first meeting, people save themselves quite a chunk of money straight away just by going, oh, I didn't realise that could also do that and that and that, you know.
But if you use a bank like Monzo, an online bank like Monzo, like I use, you get a ping and you immediately told what's gone out of your account. So you can immediately cancel it for the next time round if you get something wrong.
It's more a question of, do you understand all of your software and why you've got every single piece, and whether any of it could do what, you know, whether one piece could do what you're paying for 2 or 3 for, I think is Sam's point. And it can grow really easily, because you maybe make a decision and think, oh, I'll just add this extra tool, it's only a tenner a month, you know, and then a year, 2 years goes past and you can't really remember why you added it, because you didn't keep that log, you didn't have the requirements exercise done and have the process mapped out. You just bought it because you were like, oh, that looks nice. Someone told me on the networking group that was a great tool, and I got it. And before you know it, you've got 4 or 5 of those, and actually there's quite a bit of money per year starting to go out of your account for things you don't really need.
Yeah, I think we've all done it.
Well, I think we'll all continue to do it, to be honest, because that's basically the primary vehicle by which software companies seem to want to make their money these days, selling to small business owners. But yeah, I mean, that's why I say it's really important to understand the process, understand what requirements you're solving for before you put software into a business, and then periodically review it and decide, because the software's changed, you know, could you actually take some out? You know, fewer pieces is good. I certainly wouldn't say have a different piece of software for every step in the process, but there is a balance to strike. And kind of to Nina's original question, putting everything under one roof also has implications, right? That you're basically saying, it's a little bit like letting Facebook do all of your, you know, own all of your audience. It's like, it's all fine, but if something goes wrong with that, your whole business is locked away and you can't actually get at it. And, you know, how do we feel about that? Probably not too good. So. I'm going to be very interested, I have to say, to listen to the Vegan Business Tribe podcast episode on time saving, to see what David comes up with on that as well. So I'm sure there'll be some overlap.
Yes, you know me, I love automation. And anything that we can automate. Again, you need to make as efficient use of your time as possible. So yeah, automation is a big way towards that. So David mentions quite a bit in there as well.
Yeah, I thought he probably would do. I hadn't got around to it yet. I was hoping to listen to it at the weekend, but for various domestic reasons didn't happen. So there we go. Good. Okay, we are pretty much at time, actually. Has anyone got any other burning questions? Otherwise, we'll pick up next week. No? Okay, good. All right. Well, have a great week, everybody. Hope to see you all for next week, where we will be doing networking. And depending on numbers, either in one room or in breakout rooms. Yes, Sam's already obviously reminded you about the WhatsApp and Facebook and LinkedIn groups. And if anyone has anything you want to link us to, pop it in the chat now. Don't forget to save the chat. And I think we're there. And I shall stop the recording.
Oh, very quickly, how do you save the chat?